price he was about to pay. It was going to be a heinous murder. It was going to be crazy what was going on. Nobody had ever seen something to this degree. The Roman soldiers come and they drag him away. They put him in a holding cave overnight. The next morning they bring him out to the religious crowd. And now the religious crowd, the Sanhedrin court, they begin to do these rallies. It was like a kangaroo court. There's no way he should ever have been convicted. He did nothing wrong, but the religious crowd hated the message of Jesus because Jesus loved everybody. The religious crowd only wanted a certain few to do it a certain way, and then they could be a part of it. But no, Jesus said, come as you are. I'll take everybody. I'll deal with the leper. I'll deal with the outcast. I'll deal with the prostitute. I just love people. The religious crowd hated it, so they began to put the accusation together. What could we do? And so what they did is they took him to Pilate. They said, we want him to die. Pilate said, you got to be kidding me. What has he done wrong? They said, we just want him to die. And so Pilate, he assigns him and he takes him to a place. He says, well, what I'll do is I'll scourge him. We'll whip him and we'll just kind of punish him for what he's done. And so they get a Roman soldier. The Roman soldier was trained in how to do this to a precision. He had an 18-inch long piece of wood. Across that was called a cat o' nine tails, where about 9 strips of leather would hang off of that. Inside of each piece of leather was a piece of bone, rock, glass, steel, something that would cut into skin. They would tie the perpetrator to a post, and so he'd be held down. And the Roman soldier would stand back as the crowd gathered around, and they would lay that flagrum across his back. When they slapped that thing across his back, the bone, metal, and iron, it would dig into that Galilean olive skin. And when it dug in, the soldier would take both hands and he would pull that thing off, ripping away the flesh off of his body, so that hanging off of his back were ribbons of flesh that day. He took 39 stripes. Count with me out loud. 1, 2, 3. Let me hear you. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Come on. 9. Lift your voice. 10, 11. We're not done. 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Come on. 17, 18. No, you're not even halfway there. Come on. 22, 23, 24. 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34. They're still whipping. Come on. Come on. Come on. Come on. 39 times they hit him with a possible 1,404 wounds because of the 9 strips of leather. Laid it across his back. They mocked him. They went and they put a robe on his back and they plaited it into that place where his skin used to be, and they made it mesh with the blood. They slammed a crown of thorns on his head. They crowned him. They spit in his face. A band of soldiers, which equals 600 men, they lined up to look at him, mock him. They pulled the beard out of his face and they spit in his face. One of the most vile things you could ever do is spit in somebody's face. Science Digest came out in 2009 and said there were over 600 known germs inside the human mouth. And they spit into the open wounds of his face that day, mocking and laughing at Christ. They led him back to Pilate. Pilate said, that's enough. No man goes through a beating and a crucifixion. They said, kill him, kill him, kill him. Release the murderer Barabbas, but kill him on our behalf. Pilate says, I don't like this. You've got to be kidding me. They said, kill him. So he washes his hands of the whole thing. He said, then the blood is on you and yours. They led Jesus away to be crucified. No man should ever go through a beating and a crucifixion. It was either one or the other, but nobody goes through both. But that day, Jesus was beaten 39 times, ripped his body to shreds, slammed a crown of thorns on his head, and now made him carry his own cross. When you said that beam was 110 pounds they laid across his back. It wasn't sanded down, it wasn't smooth. And they laid it across his back to make him carry his own cross up his hill. Going to Golgotha, where he was going to be nailed to a cross. Jesus, because he's not only missing flesh, he's now missing muscle out of his back. because it was probably after the fourth or fifth hit that they ripped the flesh off of his back. Now the leather straps were embedding into the muscle part of his back. They were ripping muscle away. They were tearing this man to pieces. Many medical scholars state that you could see Jesus' kidneys from behind. He was beaten, according to Isaiah, to the degree that you can't even recognize him. He looked like a monster. Those whips lashed across his stomach, around his thighs, around his neck and shoulders. Face swelling from the thorns crammed in his head. Beard pulled out by the fistfuls. Spit still dripping down off of his face. And he's doing it because of you and because of me. And the Bible says something that I can't quite understand. It says he stood there and did not utter a word. He didn't retaliate. Bitterness and anger did not harbor in his heart. He stood there and he took it all for you and for me. They led him up that hill. They laid him down. They didn't have to wrestle him down. He laid himself down. When he laid himself out on that cross, they took spikes and drove those spikes through his arms, through his hands. The Bible says hands, but you have to understand, to read it Hebraically, the hand was anything from the tip of the finger to the end of the elbow. That was considered the hand. It makes sense that if you put this spike inside the palm of your hand, the flesh would just fall off. There's no way the spike, the body could hang on that. So it is more so believed that they put it right here at the base of the wrist. Everyone put your finger right there. Put your finger right at the base of that wrist. It's where the ulna and the radius bones come together to meet with the hand, and a spike could fit right there, and the three bones become a hinge to hang a man on. They hung him on the cross. As you read the story and you understand what's going on, as they hung him on the cross that day, he's sitting there. They also then put his ankles together and they drove a spike through both ankles. So he was hanging there on the cross. And here's what you have to understand. Most men that were crucified, they died of asphyxiation. In other words, they suffocated. It wasn't just because of the beating, they suffocated. Because the shoulders would become dislocated. And the diaphragm begins to close up because the chest cavity begins to pinch off where the lungs are. And in order to breathe, he had to push up on the spikes in his ankles to catch a breath of air. And he was innocent. Jesus. He didn't deserve this. But he hung there between heaven and earth that day, about 18 inches off the ground, so that people could get in his face and mock him and rail at him and laugh at him. And the words that we hear come from his mouth just blow my mind. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. He was crucified at 9 a.m. that morning. You think you've had a rough morning? He was beaten and crucified by 9 o'clock. Hung on the cross for 6 hours. Now it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon. The time when the Passover lamb was to die. And Jesus being the final sacrifice for you and for me. The Roman soldier comes up. It was typical that they would break the knees. Why break the knees? Because when you break the knees, the man is no longer able to push up and get a breath of air, and that would cause the asphyxiation, the suffocation to take place quicker and die. But when they got to Christ, they realized he had already died. But just to make sure, they drove a spear through his side, and the Bible says that blood and water came blowing out the side of him. Blood and water. Oh, the same thing that happens when a mother gives birth, blood and water. Because when they pierced Jesus' side, the church of Jesus Christ was being born that day. There was a birthing, there wasn't a death, there was a miracle. There was a release of